Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. It's a new year, which means there's a ton of awesome gear to check out at NAMM. We're gonna walk the show floor, demo the gear, and see what's in store for music production, hardware, and just gear in general in 2025. Timestamps are in the description if you want to go to a specific piece of gear. But yeah, let's pack up all of our stuff, head out, and see what we find. All right, we are back and we have quite a lot to talk about. I saw a lot of gear. I got to demo and sample quite a lot of gear, and then some I got to check out but didn't get to sample. So let's start though with Stylophone. So I saw Stylophone at last NAMM, but I didn't get to check it out. But this time, one of my music friends from Instagram was working the booth, so I went over there to check out what they were showing, and Dan was kind enough to show me a couple of different things, mainly their new DS-2, which is a drone synth. And that is definitely an applicable name because this thing could do some crazy sounds. A lot of fun for just creating soundscapes, getting lost in the sound design. The filters sounded incredibly lush, tons of different routing. It is semi-modular, so you could put it in a modular rack. My idea for something like this as a sample-based musician is just get lost tweaking sounds while hitting record on your DAW or in a sampler, and then finding interesting little moments in that session later, like when you're playing it back, chopping those up and then throwing those into a sampler or into your DAW and putting it in like chromatic mode, something like that, to use as a basis for a melody, a bass line, an ambient background, whatever. But that's kind of the way I would see it. You can also connect a keyboard and then you can play notes on it. Now I noticed it just kept running when you hit the note. If you're looking for drones where you can just kind of latch a sound, that's a great way to do it. Then Dan also showed me combining it with, I think it was the filter synth. I have to double check the name, but I'll put it right here once I figure it out. But these two together become this awesome combination for sound design. Dan showed me a patch using that combo.
So right now, basically we're just hearing filters. I'm not really running the oscillators through. They're at a really low pitch. Basically, we're just hearing filters squeal around and making some random little bird chirps. But if we turn the self-resonating filters off a little bit.
And then while I was messing around with the DS2 standalone, I got some crazy bleeps and bloops. All right, next up is Roland, and I got a pretty awesome deep dive, basically an hour with the Compacts series. I got to sit down with the J6, T8, and the S1. I've had one of those boutiques before, the previous iteration of these, and I'm a big fan of these smaller budget boxes like the Volcas and the Pocket Operators from Teenage Engineering, but I haven't had a lot of experience with the Roland Compacts aside from the P6. So sitting down with these was awesome because coming from something like the Volca FM, there's a lot more to these compacts and each compact. So let's start with the T8, and this had some really interesting additional features to it. Its workflow was pretty similar to the P6, which I've gotten used to in terms of step sequencing and programming, but there were some really cool features like a bass synth, which I think they said was actually a 303 type of sound. You can have two different parts in one machine. The biggest thing that caught my eye though was actually the sidechain feature, where you can sidechain the effects to a given track or instrument within the T8. The J6 is the chord machine, and you can do some really interesting chord programming. The Roland rep Jared that I was talking with showed me if you change the step resolution, I forget exactly what he called it, but basically if you change the value of how often the chords are hitting, you can get some crazy patterns out of it.
Let's choose what I call the resolution. I gotta go to menu, beats, enter. So what it's saying is every one of these is 4 beats. So like a bar.
Yeah.
I like to make it a little bit. Now it's going every beat.
And then lastly is the S1. Now this is the one I was most excited to check out because I love the SH-101. I have a Behringer clone of the SH-101, the MS1. What I really was intrigued by with the S1 is that it has polyphony, 4-voice polyphony, which the SH-101 and then all of the, or most of the new clones are monophonic. So having polyphony with the sounds of an SH-101 just seems awesome, and it was a lot of fun. One thing that I really like though is you can do a lot of parameter recording, so you can automate changes to the filter or the LFO. You can get some really crazy sounds out of it. Now I will say, as someone very familiar with the P6, while checking out these, one drawback that is common to all of the compacts is that they've crammed so much into each of these. They're very feature rich, which means there's quite a bit of a learning curve when it comes to getting your head around the workflow, at least for me. But that said, given the price point being, I think, under $250, it's awesome that you can have all of those features in it. So for me, I don't mind the little bit of a learning curve for the workflow because there's so much in this portable box that I can take with just one sampler. You could pair it with something like a Volca or the EP133, kind of mix and match these different portable little pieces of gear, and you can get some really cool combos. All right, next up is the ROLI Piano and Airwave. Now, I think these work best as a combo, but the piano was pretty cool. So the piano is a MIDI keyboard that does a lot. It felt really good to play. It had a really good feel in terms of the keyboard itself. I really liked how it lit up. I can see the merits, not just for using it, you know, in a studio or something, but for education. But the Airwave is what really stood out to me. So the Airwave tracks the movement of your hands, and you can see it on the screen as you do it, and different types of gestures like moving your hand up and down, moving it forwards and back, all modulate different parts of whatever sound you're using. So if you're using a synth, going up and down would move the filter up and down. And then you could close your hand to get a sort of gate effect. And that's something I was doing and had a lot of fun with. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like a theremin with software or controlling software. So there's a lot here. On this channel, I like to talk a lot about the benefits of hardware, being that we have this tactile functionality where we see a knob, we can move it, and it does something and we hear that instantly. But this felt like a whole other level where it wasn't just twisting a knob, you're actually moving your own body and then hearing that translate into sound. And so it felt like this really crazy expressive thing. Now, I will say, I thought I noticed sometimes where either it was moving more than I was actually moving, or there was a bit of latency when I did move my hand. Now, that might have been because the crowd was a pretty dense area. A lot of people wanted to check it out, but it could just be something that needs to get a patch. I'm not sure. I only had about maybe 10 minutes with it. Definitely something I would like to try. I want to see more of this. All right, next up is Yamaha. So I went over to Yamaha mainly to check out the SEQTRAK. As you can probably tell, I'm a big fan of samplers and grooveboxes. This is one I've never really checked out. I've seen a couple of videos on it, and honestly, when I first walked up there, I felt a little daunted looking at the box. But then I realized as I looked at it a little more, on the sides and at the labeling, all over it are a ton of buttons that do different features. And then when I spoke to the Yamaha rep Blake, he showed me that it connects via Bluetooth to an iPad app that's free. I think he said it's also on everything, Android, Mac OS. But that's where it got really cool, because all of the functions that are on these tiny little buttons on the side of the box are now just right on the iPad. So really cool little hybrid workflow there. I did ask to verify everything you can do in the app, you can do with the different buttons and stuff. So it can be a completely standalone box. And I'm coming from gear like the Digitact, the SP404. It may take a second to learn a piece of gear's workflow, but once it clicks, you can move around it fast. Again, I'm just checking it out for maybe a couple minutes. But it had some really cool sounds. It has 7 drum sounds. There's some synth tracks. The synths sounded really good. I asked if you could sample in, and there is a sample track. I didn't get to hear any of the sampling functionality, but as someone who does mostly sample-based music, that's something, if I got the chance to check it out more, I would want to dig into, because I'd want to hear kind of what you can do with it. That's the best part about samplers, is the way you can chop things up, move things around, bit rates, that type of stuff. I'm not sure what its functionality is there. If you have one, or if you know, let us know in the comments, but it is something I would want to check out further. It also has some pretty powerful per pad effects, and then the right side of the SEQTRAK actually has some performance effects that you can do live, and you can change which ones. If you look at near the middle, there's a bunch of different text, and those are all the different effects. You can set those performance sliders too. Really awesome sound, a lot of fun, especially reminded me a lot of the SP404, but a very different kind of layout to it. But similar in that you can do sort of beat repeats and add delay, reverb, all that on top of the audio you've got going on. Once I understood kind of how to use it, the workflow was a ton of fun to use. I liked moving across it and getting a sound, and I just did a simple little drum beat. So let's move on to the gear that I got to check out but didn't get to record the audio. I do have videos, so as I talk about them, I'll show some B-roll, and we'll start that with Behringer. So I went to the Behringer booth in hopes that they would have the LM Drum, which is their clone of the LinnDrum. I love the sound of the LinnDrum, and seeing a hardware version that's somewhat affordable, or at least pretty affordable, it had some really good sounds. And then the other thing that I thought was cool is that it is 12-bit, and you can sample, and you can get some really interesting grit by clipping when you send the signal in, and then the 12-bit artifacts can add a lot of sound. Now that's nothing I got to mess with here. I only had a couple minutes just playing with the drums that were there, but in the videos that I saw, that looks pretty promising. So I thought it was cool. I would have to spend more time with it to give any sort of actual judgment on it, but if you do like the sound of LinnDrums, you can check that out. And then I also saw something that was called the Pro 16. Now this looked to definitely be in their range of sequential circuits Prophet clones. Probably 16 voices, I'm guessing. Maybe a clone of the Prophet 10, something like that. It wasn't on, I couldn't play it. Next up, I did get to check out a Rossum SP1200. Now this is a replica or reissue of the classic sampler, the EMU SP1200 by the same designer. This was at the Sound Semiconductor booth. I got to take a second to play it a little bit. I have no familiarity with the SP1200 besides seeing some videos and hearing the sound of it. So all I did was just kind of hit a couple samples, check out the sound, and just take in this legendary sampler that I've always wanted to see. So I was just stoked that I got to check it out. And yeah, I mean, it sounded awesome. Definitely something I would love to check out at some point. If you've got a Rossum SP1200, let me know in the comments how you find it. I did get to run into another SP404 YouTuber, Ukes, who was demoing a Chinese stringed instrument. Now this thing sounded amazing. I played it a little bit, but what he was able to do with it was awesome. So I asked if I could sample it a little bit, and so we recorded that right into the DAW. And then I also did get to check back in with Maker Hart. Now, if you saw my NAMM video from last year, they had some really awesome pedals, but when I tried to find them later on Amazon and on their website and stuff, it seemed like nothing was out yet. So it was a bit of a mystery there, but I got to talk to them. Now they are available on Amazon. I think they're around 150 bucks, something like that. They all have two different functions, each one. So like the distortion could do two very different types of gain. One kind of sounded more like an overdrive, one was more of a heavy distortion. I really like that you get these kind of different levels of each effect. And then beyond that, they do have an LED or some sort of light source underneath, which I thought was really cool. It looks pretty awesome. So yeah, I was trying to get back there to record some guitar and mic it up. I just didn't get a chance to. So I'll have links to everything in the description if you're looking for anything. Again, this is by no means an endorsement or review, just some quick findings that I got over in my time at NAMM. So yeah, one of the reasons that I really like to go to NAMM each year is to see what is happening and coming in music production and for just gear in general. And there's a lot happening. I kind of thought we would see more with the buzzword AI. I didn't see a ton, but maybe because I was more in hardware, there wasn't as much. I did expect to see more of that. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to you, but that's just kind of like what seems to be tracking for everything right now. So I thought we'd see more of that, but it was just cool to see where everything's going. We're seeing a lot of awesome uses of all kinds of different gear and all kinds of different budgets and price points. If you want to help support the channel memberships are the best way to. You can hit the join button right below. Members at the Solar Sailor tier and above get all of the samples from my videos. So if you're looking for the samples from any of this gear that I got, head there and you can check them out. If you dug the video, hit like, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll flip all of these sounds on next week's live stream. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.